Hello and welcome to another Jay's Politics podcast, part of the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. You can reach us at jayspoliticspodcast@gmail.com. Wow. You can reach me at jayspoliticspodcast@gmail.com or at j@jpoliticsblog.com. You can reach the Podcast 99 at podcast99.com. Today, it's going to be a Thoughts by Jay segment, and it's actually going to be in multiple episodes. We're going to be discussing Joe Rogan and Tim Pool, Jack Dorsey, and Vijaya from Twitter. Now, as you can see by the title that I've done, this is Joe and Tim versus Jack and Vijaya, maybe? And the reason why I phrased it this way is not so much for clickbaitness or clickbaitiness, as it is more for the understanding that Joe does discussions. He does conversations with people. And the more he does them, sometimes they do end up being competitive. The more guests you have, the more we do things. One of the things that Joe talks about in this is that, well, I'll let him explain it. Let's get through the introductions first. Let's move this over here. All right. Let's go. Right
to my left, Tim Pool. Everybody knows and loves him. Vijaya, what is it? How do I pronounce your last name?
Vijaya.
Vijaya, not Vijaya. Vijaya.
Yes.
Vijaya. Gaddy. And your position at Twitter is?
I lead trust and safety, legal, and public policy.
That's a lot. And Jack Dorsey, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. So after this point, Joe goes into describing that a company called Cash App is owned by Twitter, and that it sponsors his show, and it has been a sponsor of his show for quite some time. And I think that clarity, that transparency that he's providing there is very important. So Tim also says that there's something that he's invested in called Square, I think is what it was. The payment processor. I don't know for sure. I haven't looked at it. I'll put it down below if I remember to. But I urge you to go and actually watch all 3.5 hours of this. While I am actually trying to set up the next timestamp here, I think it's important that we sit there and remember that this is meant to be a conversation, not a battle. And yet it's going to seem that way. I'm going to let Joe describe this section and go into the first series of questions. And it will take a while. I'm not going to jump in very much, but I will jump in where I feel that it is important for me to. Again, because it's not because I'm trying to steal Joe's show or anything like that. It's all about context. I've seen so many videos, reactions to this, where they're cutting segments, and it's like you're missing the context of the conversation. Some people don't think that the points that I'm going to try and bring out are as important as what's said by Jack and Vijaya. And I think that my initial response was, yes, I agree with what these people who are critiquing this are saying. However, I find that when I sit back and rewatched it, that the context of the conversation is more important than the sound bites that we can create as commentators. I know most people try to stick within the 10 to 15, at most 20-minute time frame when discussing these things. I'm not one of those people. I'm a blowhard. I like to hear myself talk. So moving forward, going back to the video player.
There is, we had I thought, a great conversation last time, but there's a lot of people that were upset that there were some issues that we didn't discuss in depth enough, or they felt that I didn't press you enough. I talked to Tim because, Tim and I have talked before, and he made a video about it, and I felt like his criticism was very valid. So we got on the phone and we talked about it, and I knew immediately within the first few minutes of the conversation that he was far more educated about this than I was. So I said, would you be willing to do a podcast and perhaps do a podcast with Jack? And he said, absolutely. So we did a podcast together. It was really well received. People felt like we covered a lot of the issues that they felt like I didn't bring.
I just want to jump in here. I think for those that have not followed this closely, need to understand that the order that it went is Jack came in and discussed this with Joe about a month and a half ago now or so from the time of filming this. And it was a bit of a softball interview. There were things that Joe could have actually pressed him on that were pretty public knowledge, but however, Joe is dealing with so many guests. You can't expect him to know everything. I mean, news staffs that have these wonderful interviews by people almost nightly, those are researched by a team of researchers. And I don't know that Joe has that available to him, or if he wants to have that available to him, because it doesn't. His show is very organic, in my opinion. That he just wants to have a conversation with you, and I think that's a lost art. Larry King used to kind of do the same thing, from what I remember watching of him. So, next up was Tim coming on, and as Joe explains here, that after conversations they got it all straightened out.
Up, and so then Jack and I discussed it, and we said, well, let's bring Tim on and then have Vijaya on as well. I said that right?
Yep.
Oh, it's a hard one. Sorry, I'll get
No
it
problem.
right. I promise. But so we're here. We're here.
Cool. We're here.
Today, do you know who Sean Baker is? He's a doctor who's a prominent proponent of the carnivore diet. His post was his account was frozen today. I just sent it to you, Jamie.
It's just a screenshot.
Yeah. His account was frozen today because of an image that he had, because he's a proponent of the carnivore diet. There's a lot of people that believe that this elimination diet is very healthy for you, and it's known to cure a lot of autoimmune issues with certain people, but some people ideologically oppose it because they think it's bad for the environment, or you shouldn't eat meat, or whatever the reasons are.
This is huge in the Bitcoin community, I think.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's for a lot of people that have autoimmune issues, particularly psoriasis and arthritis, is a lifesaver. It's crazy. It's essentially it's an autoimmune issue. So because he has a photo of a lion in a header eating looks like a wildebeest or something like that, his account was locked for violating his rules against graphic violence or adult content.
Now, that picture, it is his channel background. Basically, like when you click on a YouTuber's channel, you have their image, their icon, avatar, whatever you want to call it, and then they have a background picture. Mine is, if I remember correctly, my Twitter background is my podcast setup, my old podcast setup. Might be my new one. I'll have to take a look here. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is that in his Twitter, background, this doctor has the lion eating a wildebeest, a gazelle, something along those lines. I find that rather amusing, to say the least. So, let's see here. All right. So let's get back to going over this.
In profile images. That seems a little silly. And I wanted to just mention that right away. Now, whose decision is something like that? Like, who decides to lock a guy's account out because it has a nature image of, natural predatory behavior?
On this particular case, it's probably an algorithm that detected it and made some sort of an assessment. But as a general rule, how we operate as a company is we rely on people to report information to us. So if you look at any tweet, you can kind of pull down on the caret on the right and you can say report the tweet, and then you have a bunch of categories you can choose from of what you want to report. I think this one in particular, though, is probably an algorithm.
So how does he have the option to protest that or to ask someone to review it?
Absolutely.
Okay, now, I think Vijaya makes a very great point here, as well as Joe's follow-up question. It shows that he's listening. He's been doing this for a long time. I mean, this is episode 1258. So obviously he's been doing something right to get the following he's got. But the point I'm trying to make here is that Vijay is, I think, right. It was an algorithm. It was a bot caught it, saw that it's graphic in nature because of the blood coming off of the red meat, the raw red meat, etc. That's fine. Hopefully the doctor has already appealed this and been like, look, this is a nature thing. This isn't a violence thing. If it was reported by somebody, it's pretty petty, in my opinion. But I think Joe's follow-up question is, can he appeal it? And Vidge's initial response, as you heard there, was yes, that he could. It shows that Twitter is actually actively listening to the complaints of people.
Absolutely. And I'm guessing that people are already reviewing it, but there's a choice to appeal any action, and that would go to a human to make sure that it is actually a violation of the rules, or in this case, if it's not, then it would be removed.
Is that a violation of the rules? That image?
I don't think so. I don't think that that would be what we're trying to capture in terms of graphic images in an avatar. It's more about violence towards humans, unless it was some sort of cruelty depicting animals or something like that. But this.
So I think this is also a fair point, is that she's talking about the image itself. When Joe pointed it out again, is like, no, this is something you'd see in like her mindset. The mentality that I see her going through is that this is something you would see in like National Geographic. This is something you would see in a textbook, talking about, the savannas and things like that. And I think that she's right. Twitter wouldn't want to give you a strike for this or, punish you for this. It's just the algorithm caught it. And now they can take the time to teach the algorithm that, hey, not all of these images are like this. That's not to say that cruelty to animals, like images of dogs fighting in a dog fight arena, would be okay. That's the way I'm interpreting it. My opinion of it. This is obviously going to be other people's interpretations of how it's done. But at the same time, if I have two dogs that are just playing in a backyard, two little puppies that are, roughhousing, that's not violence either. That's not cruelty to animals. Dogs play and tussle just as much as, humans do. So diverging there.
Seems not the intention of the rule.
Does this one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up immediately? Does this highlight a flaw in the system in that people can target an individual? Because with him, like I said, he's a doctor and a proponent of this carnivore diet, but he's also ruthless in his condemnation and mocking of vegans. He does it all the time. And so then they get upset at him, and they can target posts and just report them en masse. And when they do that, then this becomes an issue.
I think this does reveal part of, the challenges that we face as a global platform at scale. In this, I don't know what happened in this case, so it's hard for me to talk about it. But what I would say is that it doesn't really matter if one person reports it or 10,000 people report it. Like, we're going to review the reports and we're going to make an assessment, and we're never going to, kick someone off the platform finally and forever without a person taking a look and making sure that it's an actual violation of the rules.
Right. Okay. So,
but the mob reporting behavior does happen.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that we as a society have to fix ourselves. It's not beholden to Twitter, YouTube, or the like to solve this problem. The mob mentality, the mob reporting mentality is pretty ass backwards, in my opinion. It's pretty petty. Yes, we've all probably been there and done it. Report somebody for something stupid. If somebody tells me, oh, you need to report this video for this, and this, I'm like, most of the time I'm just ignoring it. If it's a video that I have seen and I agree that it is something that should be reported, I would report it, whether they told me to or not. I mean, that's the thing, is when it comes to reporting, I don't believe that mass reporting something is fair or valid, because it's petty, grade school, childish behavior. And I think that the more that we engage in it, especially as adults, the less credibility we have, discussing these things. Like I said, I have been a part of a few issues where I know somebody's been mass flagged, mass reported on something. Not because they not because of it being an issue of, hey, let's just fuck with somebody. It's because they actually did something that warranted the reporting because they broke the rules. That is the hardest part about this, because there are people who just are petty. Not everybody who asks for a mass flagging is petty, but I find the action itself is pretty petty in and of itself. So moving on.
It does.
It happens across the spectrum.
I'd have to assume it's going to be one direction. I can't imagine he would target vegans, but vegans would target him, right?
Well, he might. I mean, he doesn't. But
is he the kind of guy who's going to want to report to vegans and get them banned from Twitter, or is he going to want to make fun of them?
He's going to make fun of them. Yeah.
They're going to target him to try and get him removed by exploiting the system that you guys have.
It may not be him, though. It could also be his followers. It's a really complicated world out there, so you don't. The motivations of why people mob report are different, and it's not.
Vijaya kind of explains it okay here. It's not that it's. Yes, the mentality or the reasoning behind it is different for each one, but just the fact that people engage in it is pretty pathetic. Again, like I said, I've done it myself, but when people ask me to do it and I opt to flag something or report something, it is because of the fact that they did do something that violated, in my opinion, the terms of service that they signed and that I've signed. I do not just flag somebody's video because so-and-so told me to. I flag it because I view there's a valid reason. And if you're out there flagging things just to flag them, then you have some issues there. You need to figure out what you're doing with your life, that just flagging videos for the hell of flagging videos is okay. Especially if it's somebody whose livelihood is dependent upon, social media. Nobody should have their life totally covered by social media if they can help it, but I can understand why the appeal is there, but people also don't realize the amount of work that goes into doing something like this either. So, it is what it is.
Not always under someone's control.
It could even be other carnivore diet proponents who are just jerks who don't like him because he's getting all the love. People are weird.
Yeah,
but it's
that's
just
true.
The idea though is that it does kind of highlight a bit of a flaw in that it's good that someone can, because you might see something awful, someone doxing someone or something like that, and then you can take that and report it, and then people can see it and get rid of it and minimize the damage that's done.
Well, there's another big problem here in that, is the carnivore diet legitimately healthy? Is it a threat to your health? And if it is what is Twitter's responsibility in controlling that information? Right. So just to clarify, my opinion is, if he wants to be a proponent for the carnivore diet, let him. But you've got people on YouTube who are being deranked for certain beliefs about certain health issues that I don't agree with. And so one of the risks then is, we're coming towards a position where people think some ideas are better than others, therefore, as a company, we're going to restrict access to certain information.
You mean like anti-vax?
Exactly,
people?
right.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to say is, at what point would you guys restrict someone from sharing false information about vaccines that could get someone hurt?
That is not a violation of Twitter's rules. No.
I think, I'd be interested to hear your ideas around this, but our perspective right now is around this concept of variety perspective. Like, are we encouraging more echo chambers and filter bubbles, or are we at least showing people other information that might be counter to what they see? And there's a bunch of research that would suggest that further emboldens their views. There's also research that would suggest that it at least gives them a consideration about what they currently believe. So,
well, you guys. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, given the dynamics of our network being completely public, we're not organized around communities, we're not organized around topics. We have a little bit more freedom to show more of the spectrum of any one particular issue. And I think that's how we would approach it from the start. That said, we haven't really dealt much with misinformation more broadly across these sorts of topics. We've focused our efforts on elections and mainly elections right now.
Okay. I let that go a lot longer than I actually was intending because, again, context is the key here for what Jack's talking about. YouTube, you can put yourself in an echo chamber very quickly by only following certain things, only watching certain things, only posting about certain things, keeping things like that around. So, what do we do with that? One of the many, what do I want to put it here? One of the many things that I think Twitter excels at is that you are able to put yourself into the best advantageous way of receiving information by not blocking people, by not actually reporting people, by not secluding yourself into a bubble. The problem is that they allow people to put themselves in those bubbles too. I think that somebody that just randomly uses, blocker bots to basically block anybody that posts anything that might be controversial to what you believe in your ideology, they should have their account suspended, and all those blocks for no interaction should be removed. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Steve Shives. You've blocked me and we've never interacted. I mean, yeah, I don't agree with what a lot of Steve Shives has to say, but I actually enjoy his Track Actually stuff, even if I don't agree with it. I mean, I could feel that, when I decide to actually want to interact with him, it'll probably be on one of those videos, But the fact that he's already blocked me, now that if him and I want to have a conversation on Twitter, he has to go and unblock me for it. Then he'll see what I talk about, and then he'll block me anyways. It's just the opportunity to have that echo chamber there is problematic. Is problematic at best, and I'm going to. I actually had a different timestamp for this, but I'm actually going to let it play through since it's basically like a minute away. And just to give you a kind of what it is about, is we go from the topic of the avatar. We're going from the topic of the avatar to the nuts and bolts of what this conversation's about, and that is the bias that is inherent in Twitter, that they acknowledged, that they have acknowledged in the past, but I don't know that they want to mess with that bias. They don't want to bring that bias back more towards the center. So, I'm going to do this from your perspective. So the left and the right. Twitter's bias is I won't say it's way over here to the left, but if you're trying to have a conversation platform, you should have your biases somewhere in the centerish area there. When you start going to the left, everybody that's to the right of that left part of the spectrum is now basically considered the far right. You know what I'm saying? I just don't see how it could be any other way. But I'll let the show do the talking. I'm just going to input my own opinion when needed.
YouTube is a different animal.
It
YouTube,
is.
someone can really convince you that the earth is flat if you're gullible and you watch a 45-minute YouTube video.
Right.
It's kind of a different thing.
But I wanted to just kind of get into that statement you made about misinformation and whether or not you'll police it. So
I think that the tough part of this is really, and love to have a discussion about this, is do you really want corporations to police what's true and not true?
Absolutely not.
That's a really, really tough position.
But you guys do that.
We try not to do that. We don't want to do that.
But you do in your rules.
But the places that we focus on is where we think that people are going to be harmed by this in a direct and tangible way that we feel a responsibility to correct.
All right. I know they're getting ready to jump into another question about this, but I think Tim's got a point here, is that when it comes to Twitter, when it comes to banning people, when it comes to suspending people, there are things that are said by other people on Twitter that are said by the left, that if it were said by somebody on the right, the person on the right would be banned. No questions asked. And I don't mean ban like permanent ban. I mean like a suspension, a lock of their account for X number of hours until the offending tweet is gone. Now the problem with that is now that you delete that have that person delete their part of the conversation, you still have half a conversation left up. Where's the context? You're missing context that now we can't figure out what was going on. So we have to balance that. We have to balance all of this, and I don't think Twitter does that fairly or equitably. Wow, I can't speak today.
You say
Correct
in your rules, Tim, what do you mean by that? Like,
dead naming and misgendering.
Dead naming and misgendering.
Yeah. That's a specific ideology that's unique to a very small faction of people in this world that you guys actually ban people for.
So the way I think of it is it's behavior based, and I know you think of it as content, and we can disagree on this point. But this is about, why are you doing this to a trans person? Why are you calling them by this name when they've chosen to go by a different name?
Okay, I'm going to let them explain because Joe asked for the explanation, and I will let that be explained. I think that Tim's point is more accurate in the real world. In the real world of what Twitter is and how it reacts to things, than it is in the their grand model of how they perceive how they're implementing the rules. If I, as a cis white hetero male, were to call a friend by their dead name on Twitter, and somebody who's a friend of my transgendered friend, my transition friend, whatever you want to call them, my trans friend, sees that, throws a fit about it to Twitter, I can get suspended. Even if I and the person that I dead named, said, no, this is not an issue, this is just a slip of the tongue because this person has known me, I've known that person, and the person I dead named said, we've known each other 30 years, is just a slip of a tongue, and it's not meant as harassment. Odds are I'm still going to be suspended, no matter what. Or by the time they decide to react, my suspension is already over. That's the problem with these platforms. There's so much with these rules that they say is hateful, or the speech itself is hateful, but they can't directly prove it. They can't prove the intent entirely, because even going back through the conversation, they could see that for a while there I was calling the person by their chosen name, and then I a couple hours between, I forget, and I'm like, oh hey, so and so, what about this? That's where I think the broader scheme of things is missed. They don't look at necessarily the full context of a conversation. They look at the immediate context, and that can be detrimental to a user.
Or why are you outing them in some way? Like, what is your intent and purpose behind that?
I don't mean to interrupt, but in the interest of clarity, I want to explain what dead naming means.
Right.
So why don't you go ahead?
A transgender individual changes their name when they transition. A dead name would be their birth name or the name they went by before the transition.
Yeah, okay.
So
because my mom's probably going, what? I'm ready for the text. What's a dead name? And
I will clarify too, your rules specifically say targeted misgendering and dead naming, I believe is correct, right?
So years ago, we passed a policy that we call our hateful conduct policy, and that prohibits targeting or attacking someone based on their belonging in any number of groups, whether it's because of their religion or their race or their gender, their sexual orientation, their gender identity. So it was something that's broad-based, is that you can't choose to attack people because of these characteristics.
But you do have limits on what characteristics you police, right? So you're not banning people for targeted trans-speciesing others, right?
Well, we have also general abuse and harassment rules, right? Which says you can't engage in abuse and harassment on the platform.
But you can't detonate someone, but you can call them stupid.
Generally, I mean, if you created an account that only was there to call the same person stupid 5,000 times, we'd probably view that as
targeted harassment.
Targeted harassment.
Right.
It's a function of behavior, like because people with our system can do this in massive velocity, which would ultimately silence you from the platform, or just say like, I give up, I don't want to deal with this thing, I'm out.
Well, we can just get into all of the big examples. I mean, starting with me.
I'd love to, Tim, but can we just take a step back and try to level set what we're trying to do with our policies?
Sure.
Sorry, don't mean to pause on such an awkward face from Vijaya. That's not my intent. I commend Vijaya for this because she wants to make sure that everybody's on the same level when it comes to the policies and the rules. And the problem with a lot of terms of service and user rules are they're written vaguely so the platforms have a way to respond and punish people. And I understand that, and most people who are users do understand that. The problem is when you try to make everybody understand, it's easy for a lawyer to tell a lawyer and make, what I call legalese understandable. But it's not always understandable to John and Jane Q public. That's just... And trying to, even in this setting, it's not going to reach all the people the way she's intending it to.
I think it's worth
Please,
doing
yes.
So as a high level, I personally, and this is my job to run the policy team, I believe that everyone has a voice and should be able to use it. And I want them to be able to use it online. Now, where we draw a line is when people use their voice and use their platform to abuse and harass other people to silence them. Because I think that that's what we've seen over the years is a number of people who have been silenced online because of the abuse and harassment they've received, and they either stop talking or they leave the platform in its entirety. If you look at free expression and free speech laws around the world, they're not absolute. They're not absolute. There's always limitations on what you can say, and it's when you're starting to endanger other people.
So my question then is, when I was physically threatened on Twitter, you guys refused to take down the tweet. And I showed up in Berkeley and someone physically threatened me because they were encouraged to. When I was in Venezuela, I was physically threatened by a high-profile individual, 10,000 people tweeting at me, you guys do nothing. Right? So I guess there's the obvious question of why does it always feel like your policies are going one direction politically? You say it's about behavior. You said it several times already. But I've got tons of examples of that not being the case.
And you will always be able to find those examples.
Yeah, examples where you guys were alerted multiple times and did nothing. Like when Antifa doxed a bunch of law enforcement agents, some of the tweets were removed, but since September, this tweet is still live with a list of private phone numbers, addresses, yet Kathy Griffin, she's fine. The guy who threatened the lives of these kids in Covington and said, lock them in the school and burn it down, you did nothing. I mean, he got suspended, he had to take his tweets down. Was he banned for threatening the lives of kids? Absolutely not.
Now, here's the thing. A lot of people, center and right, view the way that the left does things on a moral high ground. Like they're trying to claim that they have a moral high ground above the centrists, the left, or the rights, the moderates, etc. And to an extent, that is true. I mean, I can go through Twitter, my own personal Twitter feed, and see a variety of moral grandstanders. That is to say that they feel that they have the moral high ground in any given situation. And when you're trying to talk to these people and you're like, okay, look, this is this situation and this is how I view it. And I don't think that, I know that you're not wrong in this case, but you're still wrong in the way you're approaching it. And people on the left don't see it that way. What Tim's talking about here is specifically people asking for the docs of the kids, documents or doxing of children because they wore a MAGA hat, a Make America Great Again hat, which I was planning on wearing my Make Orwell Fiction Again hat today, but I don't think that applies here to this. But it is one of those situations where with Kathy Griffin and the people who were calling for doxes and the violence against these children, because they didn't have the full understanding of the situation that happened on that January Friday, they should, the bare minimum, have their Twitter accounts suspended for a lengthy period of time. Because these are children we're talking about. Yes, they're teenagers. Yes, they're young adults, so to speak. But they are still minors as far as the law is concerned. And threatening violence against them, I'm sorry, there's no place for that on any platform. Because, again, as Vijaya said, free speech is not absolute. There are limitations. And if you are calling for the death and violence against children, you don't deserve an account on this platform at all. Now, I know it's hard to police everybody. I mean, hell, I have like 5 or 6 different emails that I can make accounts for on Twitter, on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, etc. That's not the point. The point is the balancing of the person's actions. And if you know this person has multiple accounts, then you need to ban them. You know, at the very least, ban them for a short period of time or a lengthy period of time. Personally, I think Kathy Griffin's, statement about these children deserved at least a minimum 2-week banning. No Twitter whatsoever for her. And as a celebrity, that's career suicide right there. Maybe you'll get these actors and actresses, these celebrities, thinking about how are these people, whoa, if I do or say something on Twitter, I'm not going to be able to speak to my fans through that medium. Where else am I going to go? That's why we have sites like Gab, Minds, So, I mean, it's just Bitchute for YouTube. I mean, it is what it is. I think that Tim's going in the right direction here.
So again, we have, and I'm happy to talk about all these details. We have our policies that are meant to protect people, and they're meant to enable free expression as long as you're not trying to silence somebody else. Now, we take a variety of different enforcement mechanisms around that. Sometimes you get warned. Sometimes your tweet is forced to be deleted. It's a very rare occasion where we will outright suspend someone without any sort of warning or any sort of ability to understand what happened.
What did you guys do with Kathy Griffin when she was saying she wanted the names of those young kids wearing the MAGA hats at the Covington High School kids?
Yeah, that's a great example, Joe. So in that particular case, our doxing policy really focuses on posting private information, which we don't consider names to be private. We consider your home address, your home phone number, your mobile phone number, those types of things to be private. So in that particular case, we took what I think now is probably a very literal interpretation of our policy and said that that was not a doxing incident.
Do you think that was an error?
I think that it was short-sighted, and given the context of what was going on there, that if I was doing this all over again, I would probably ask my team to look at that through the lens of what was the purpose behind that tweet. And if the purpose was, in fact, to identify these kids to either dox them or abuse and harass them, which it probably was, then we should be taking a more expansive view of that policy and including that type of content.
And Vijaya, this comment is directly towards you, Vijaya. And I hope you don't take this negatively. But this is one of those instances where it is covered by your policy. You better go back and lay the wood down, smack the hammer down, whatever phrasing you want to use to show that these people that we are not going to be biased against people. Because I guarantee you, if this had been done at a conservative rally, which ironically was going on that day, and a bunch of teenagers that were supporting the LGBTQ community were actually harassing people, actually doing things that these MAGA kids were, these Covington High School kids and Nick Sandman were actually accused of, I don't think you would have batted an eye twice when the conservatives would say, we need the names of these kids, and doxing and yada yada, and any violence towards those kids would have been dealt with harshly. I'm quite certain of it, and you would have stood by it wholeheartedly. and one, I would not blame you for it, obviously, because violence against children, totally inappropriate for any civilized country with free speech rights. But the fact that it is selectively applied, and you have a clear case here with Kathy Griffin and other people, that, oh, you have to delete your tweets and then you can have your Twitter back. That's not, that doesn't teach anybody anything. That allows them to push the line. I want to see slightly harsher penalties for things involving minors. I don't know about the rest of you, but that's what I'm thinking.
Especially considering the fact they're minors. I mean, I would think that
Exactly.
right away that would
Exactly.
be the approach. So this is a trial and error, sort of learn and move on with new information, sort of a deal.
Absolutely. We're going to learn. We're going to make a ton of mistakes. We're trying to do this with hundreds of millions of accounts all around the world, numerous languages. We're going to make mistakes. Even if we get better, there will always be mistakes. But we're hoping to learn from those and to make ourselves better and to catch cases like Tim's or others where we clearly may have made an error. And I'm open to having those discussions. I'm sorry, Tim, familiar with your specific cases, but I'd love to follow up with you and really try to understand.
But I
Do you want to see the tweet?
We definitely can pull that up.
So it's bit.ly/Antifa tweet, all lowercase.
Okay. See, now that's the thing, is I actually typed it in wrong in my browser. Let me... Oh, I'm not even authorized to see the status of it. That's interesting, Tim. It took me to the Greater Seattle GDC, General Defense Committee. Let me see if I can get this pulled up here. Sorry for the blank screen, guys, for a minute. Let me get this figured out here. Where are you? So, and I will type it in here one more time for you guys, just so you can see it. Let me get this straightened up here. bit.ly. Oh, let me move that out of the way. /Antifa tweet. Sorry, you are not authorized to see the status. Now, I think, again, this is 2 weeks after the fact. Yeah, about 2 weeks after the show actually originally aired. So it's more likely that they've taken down the tweet, and that is perfectly fine. I'm glad they did. But I just want it to be known that we are able to do that. All right, so looks like I've lost control from my phone, but that is a-okay. So let's go back to the video player, and I've only got a few more minutes of what I'm trying to cover in this episode here, so bear with me. We'll keep it going forward here.
This is also an evolution in prioritization as well. One of the things we've come to recently is we do need to prioritize these efforts, both in terms of policy, enforcement, how we're thinking about evolving them. One of the things that we want to focus on as number one is physical safety, and this leads you immediately to something like doxing. And right now, the only way we take action on a dox.
Sorry about that. I was actually trying to click at a different spot, and my mouse jumped on me.
Doxing case is if it's reported or not. What we want to move to is to be able to recognize those in real time, at least in the English language, recognize those in real time through our machine learning algorithms, and take the action before it has to be reported. So we're focused purely right now on going after doxing cases with our algorithms so that we can be proactive. That also requires a much more rigorous appeals process to correct us when we're wrong. But we think it's tightly scoped enough. It impacts the most important thing, which is someone's physical safety. Once we learn from that, we can really look at the biggest issue with our system right now is all the burden is placed upon the victim. So we only act based on reports. We don't have a lot of enforcement, especially with more of the takedowns that are run through machine learning and deep learning algorithms.
But if something is reported, a human does review it eventually, or are there a series of reports that you never get to?
There's probably reports we don't. I mean, we prioritize the queue based on severity, and the thing that will mark severity is something like physical safety or private information or whatnot. So
here's the thing. How, if I say somebody's physically threatened me on Twitter, and yet I have a history of, commenting against left-wing agendas, like far left agendas, things like that, then how it's not too hard for the person reviewing it being like, oh, well, here's a history of you. Here's oh, they're just joking, or they're just this. I'm not saying that's what Twitter does. I am definitely not saying that's what Twitter does. I'm just speculating that this could be a possibility. How do we know this doesn't happen? If somebody doesn't like my content on YouTube, somebody doesn't like my content that I post on Twitter, etc. If that is the case, and they're reviewing my content, or my appeal, or my report, how is that okay? You know what I mean? How is it to allow them their personal judgment in this? I try to look, again, this is just me speaking for me here. I try to look at each situation on its own merit. That's why when it comes to politics, I don't view myself as a Democrat, socialist, communist, etc. I don't look at myself as a libertarian, Republican, name any ideology, right of Republican, etc. My point is that some people aren't trained to do this. Some people never learned these skills, and I won't even say trained, because this is a skill that you have to be willing to employ yourself. And I don't think that it's taught enough in schools to use that mentality, but at the same time, you have to be willing to use that mentality yourself. So, I'm just gonna let Jack keep going here.
Generally, we try to get through everything, but we have to prioritize that queue even coming in.
So if someone threatened the lives of someone else, would you ban that account? Would you tell them, like let's say someone tweeted 3 times, kill these people, I want them dead, 3 times. Is that?
Yes, that's a violation.
You didn't ban him though.
And
Well,
I don't know why
pull
that
that
is.
up, Jamie.
That's I don't know. I don't necessarily want to give out specific usernames, because then people just point the finger at me and say I'm getting these people banned. But
Yeah.
During Covington, this guy said multiple times he wanted his followers to go and kill these kids.
Yeah, and we have to look at that, but we also have to look in the context, because we also have, I think we talked about this a little bit in the last podcast, but we have gamers on the platform who are saying exactly that to their friends that they're going to meet at the game, in the game tonight. And without the context of that relationship, without the context of the conversation that we're having, we would take the exact same action on them incorrectly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I agree with you there, Jack. That context is the key. But the problem is I think the way that Twitter handles context is not entirely even. A lot of news lately has been going around that YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki has said that she's not going to ban Ben Shapiro yet because he hasn't actually violated terms of service, hasn't done anything to warrant it yet. And yet you have her interviewer saying, well, but my son is 13, is being influenced by this. You need to type of. That's not what directly she's saying, but it's the mentality that we have. If you want to have a platform that is allowing people to discuss ideas, and yes, you will get echo chambers, you will get spherical bubbles of influence, that isolates people. But if you are only taking action against those that are of the opposite political persuasion of you, are you not invariably creating what you don't want to create? and that's where the context comes in. You have to look at the entire thread with people. And I don't think that that's necessarily what's happening with Twitter. I don't have any proof that it is or it is not. I'm just saying that it is. How do I want to put it? I just don't think that that's how I see Twitter applying their rules fairly. And that's how a lot of people that are not of the Silicon Valley persuasion viewed some of these things, is that the rules are not being applied fairly, but yet to those that are progressive enough, they do see it as they do see it as being applied fairly. That is what I'm taking from Twitter on the face value. Now I haven't been super active on Twitter. Like, I'll go on and post things, but I'm not like searching things since I've downloaded this and I've watched it a couple times. But I do, again, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that that's how I still view Twitter, as handling things. Things could have changed since this. I don't know. So
That I understand. I think in the case of Covington, though, this user was so high profile. He's a verified user. He's got something like 20,000 followers, and it was highlighted by numerous conservative media outlets saying, wow, it's screenshotted, it's being shared. I mean, you had a Disney producer saying a picture of a wood chipper with a body being thrown in it, saying that's what he wanted to happen. So I do know that some of these accounts got locked.
A Disney producer was doing that?
Well, I'll clarify. Fact check me on that. But that's basically the conversation that was had. There's a guy at Disney he posted a picture from Fargo of someone being tossed in a wood chipper, and he says, "I want all these MAGA kids, done like this." You had another guy who specifically said, "Lock them in the school, burn it down." Said a bunch of disparaging things, and then said, "If you see them, fire on them." And he tweeted that more than once.
And those tweets were taken down. Those were violations of our rules.
I'm pretty sure it's actually illegal to do that, right? It's to tell any individual to commit a felony is a crime, right?
Well,
Yes.
incitement of violence is certainly
So
a crime in many places.
I just have to wonder how I understand the context issue, but this is what I talk.
Well, there's context and scale too, though. Right.
But Tim, those accounts were actioned. They may not have been actioned the way you wanted to, but the tweets were forced to be deleted, and the account
Sure.
took a penalty for that. So
I understand that.
What kind of a penalty?
Well, again, as I said earlier, Joe, we don't usually automatically suspend accounts with one violation because we want people to learn. We want people to understand what they did wrong and give them an opportunity not to do it again.
Right.
And it's a big thing to kick someone off the platform, and I take that very, very seriously. So I want to make sure that when someone violates our rules, they understand what happened and they're given an opportunity to get back on the platform and change their behavior. And so in many of these cases, what happens is we will force someone to acknowledge that their tweet violated our rules, force them to delete that tweet before they can get back on the platform.
now, I can see that as a great learning opportunity, but the problem is that a lot of terms of service is written in a way that if you do it multiple times, you get violations. Like, I know Twitter and YouTube are totally different things, but if I were to play content, no commentary, anything like that, for 5, 6, 7, 8 videos straight, but with minor tweaks that weren't quite enough to make fair use a thing, if I don't get called out on that and then all of a sudden I get flagged with it for 7 or 8 times, I lose my channel. There's no warning about that. Or if, say I do, like I'm doing commentary right now, and I get 4, 5, 6, 7 people, flag my channel for using their content in my video where I'm doing my commentary, they can kick me off the platform. And that's not exactly fair. It's not fair to me because, like Vijaya says, I'm not given a chance to learn from my mistake. Now, the problem I have with that is that when people are doing something that is clearly illegal about it, like when I mean illegal, I mean threats of harm, calls to violence, that type of illegality, or actually doing something illegal in a video or something, but something along those lines, like severely illegal, then yes, that would be okay. Like if I'm sitting here telling you to go kill those MAGA kids, and I do it 4 or 5 times before Twitter even catches me, guess what? My account should be deleted because I should know better. That should go well above and beyond of what anybody understands to be regular free speech. But again, we don't teach the rights that people are entitled to, and how our rights end where we infringe on others' rights, including free speech. Ends. We have to be taught those critical values. I'm going to let Vijaya finish up here.
And in many cases, if they do it again, we give them a timeout, which is like 7 days. And we say, look, you've done it again.
Suspension.
It's a temporary suspension. If you do it again.
Timeout, you're a mom.
I'm totally a mom, exactly. And
A new mom, too.
And if you do it again, then you're done.
Right.
So it's kind of like, 3 strikes. So sort of like baseball. And so in some of these cases that Tim's referencing, I have to imagine, because these tweets were deleted, they are violations of our rules. People are upset that the account came back again and was allowed to say other things. But we did take action on those tweets. They were violations of our rules.
And then you have people like Milo, who is mean to a person.
I'm going to end it right there. We'll back it up a little bit here on the next video. But I think that it's important that we kind of let this sink in here. That when it comes to these timeouts, when people are upset about somebody coming back, it's not so much that we're upset about them coming back. It's the fact that now they're continuing to do the same thing, and it's taking more time for you, Twitter, to react. You should, if somebody is justifiably given a strike, that first, hey, delete your, lock their account, delete your tweets, and then you can come back on. And they continue to do that. That shows they didn't learn anything. And you need to be watching that. Maybe you should have a team, and I know it's a lot of users, don't get me wrong, but I'd be interested to know the percentage of offenders who reoffend shortly thereafter. And what I mean by shortly is like within 72 hours. Or, what was it, 72? 96 hours. 3 to 4 days. How many of them reoffend and then get called out on it? And rather than Twitter being proactive in it, it's us, the users, that have to report it. Now, I don't think I've ever reported anybody on Twitter directly myself, because nobody's ever been really offensive to me. But at the same time, I think it's rather ironic that you're justifying that it's okay for them to do this. That's what I'm taking from this, Vijaya. And I highly doubt you're ever going to see this video. But if you do, I hope that you would consider, if it's a small enough percentage, I'm talking like, 1.5% or less of the users doing this, you could totally devote, a team to egregious offenses to monitor the people when they come back. There are things that are said in jest, to rile somebody up, that gets reported as offensive or harassment that shouldn't be. And I think for the most part, your moderators have been known to, okay, that was a joke. Yeah, just don't do it again type of thing. And I know a few repeat offenders on that just keep getting a slap on the wrist. And I agree with that. That's just, whatever. Because they're not doing it to the same person. It's just, whatever. I'm rambling here. My point is up to this point, we have had the discussion of general rule breaking. Yes, there have been some specifics with the doctor, with these accounts that Tim's talking about, in relating to Covington, Kathy Griffin, and I think I think they're making good headway. But the one ultimate piece of criticism that I have for Twitter in this, and I'm not specifically directing it at Jack or at Vijaya, just Twitter as a company as a whole, is you have to try to get your bias out of there as much as possible. It's okay to have a left-wing bias and stuff, but you can't have an extreme left-wing bias, and that's the problem. That's what we need to see as your consumers, as your users. I don't feel safe posting a lot of stuff on Twitter anymore unless I'm dealing specifically with sports or, family vacation stuff. I have toned down my personal politics on Twitter. I have even strayed away from using my political Twitter handle, because I'm afraid that if I say something wrong that offends somebody, I'm going to get booted off of Twitter entirely. I'm not going to be able to join back up. And I have some other things that I want to do with Twitter that are totally not even relevant to politics at all. So, with that, this has been episode 1 of Joe and Tim versus Jack and Vijaya, maybe. I will pretty much back up, like I said, a few seconds and hop in at the Milo point. But there will be times where I'm going to skip through, because, again, I don't want to do this in 30-minute blocks, because that's what I've only done about 20-minute block here. And it's going to be literally 10 episodes if I do that. So I thank you for watching. I know this has been a long video. But again, I truly believe that context, when discussing something as in-depth as this, is the most important part. So take care. Catch me back for the next one.